Howdy peeps, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if it's your first time here. And we are today back to local history, in this case very local, in my town. And we're looking at my blue Neocaridina shrimp tank, as it's nicer to look at those than it is me reading notes. It's a Saturday, it's the 18th of July in 1807 in Attleborough, small market town between Norwich and Thetford, around about 1300 residents at the time. In the White Horse Public House on London Road, next to White Horse Lane, funny enough. Inside, no different to any other Saturday, regulars in their chosen places, air thick with tobacco smoke and laughter. Samuel Alden has a pint in his hand. Probably not the first of the day, probably not going to be the last. Well, certainly not going to be the last. And his wife Martha is with him, although she may have thought otherwise about the amount of booze. The time was around about mid-morning, shortly after the pub had opened up for the day. The Alden's neighbour, Edmund Draper, walked in, joined the couple as any good neighbour would do. Martha, clearly occupied with other thoughts, chose that moment to leave, her excuse being that she's going home with her child. We'll never know the true reason. Was she allowing her husband space to have a man chat? Did she feel uncomfortable in the neighbour's company, or had there been a bit of a bad atmos this morning between husband and wife? Yeah, I think we're going to get a good clue. The fact of the matter was that as soon as Martha had stepped outside, the two men moved away from the bar, sat more comfortably in a nook, continued their conversation and their drinking that went on till almost midday, and they both left. Draper then accompanied Alden to his house before moving on in the direction of Thetford to his own home, seeing no one else on the road as he went. Draper was sober, having only been in the White Horse for a short time. Alden was a little bit cut, let's put it this way, showing signs of a slight stagger as they walked home. Despite the hampered pace of the men's journey, they actually managed to catch up with Martha on the way home, although no one seems to know why she was so delayed. The trio arrived at the Alden's cottage at the same time, and that was the last time Draper saw his drinking companion and wife, accompanied by their 7-year-old son, together. He was to say later, after the news had broken, that at no time in his presence had ill words passed between Samuel and Martha. On the following Sunday, 19th of July 1807, at Charles Hill, also of Attleborough, rose at very early, silly o'clock, between 2 and 3 a.m. He was going to see his daughter, who worked at Shelfanger Hall, some 10 miles away, so an early start was necessary. It was somewhat damp, so he decided he was going to take the turnpike road in the direction of Thetford. On the way, he also had to pass the Alden's cottage, barely a quarter of a mile from his own home. As he approached, he saw that the door was open, and Martha was standing outside, apparently not doing anything in particular. She did, though, say to the traveller, she could not think what smart young man it was who was coming down the common. To which Hill replied, "Martha, what the devil are you up to at this time of the morning?" Usually a good question to ask if you see someone out and about at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Her excuse, if that's what it was to say that she'd been down to the pit in the garden with some water. Her garden was not attached to the cottage, but on the opposite side of the road. Beyond this, Martha had a bit of a ramble about she'd not been long home from Attleborough, where she had been at the White Horse with her husband and Edmund Draper. They all came home together during the day, but her husband had gone back again. Martha then said that her husband had a brother who was going to Essex, and that he swore he would go with his brother. Mr. Hill thought this a bit strange in light of the fact that Samuel Alden had contracted to work harvest with Mr. Parson that year, which Martha agreed, if he does go to Essex he won't be coming back to harvest. And if he got a job he'll never settle in it. In hindsight, was she looking for an alibi for what would sort of inevitably emerge as his sudden and unexpected disappearance? Question for the future. It's something that Hill didn't think about as he continued on his way and Martha went indoors. The rest of that day must then have dragged for Martha. As it began to close and evening approached, matters took an even stranger twist. Mary Orvis, a friend of Martha's, found the latter on her doorstep. This in itself wasn't entirely unexpected, because they're friends, they visit each other's cottages. What was really unexpected was that an agitated Martha asked Mary to return with her to her cottage, Martha not giving a reason why, and waited until both women were inside the cottage and the door was shut securely. "I have killed my husband," said Martha, although in a far stronger Norfolk accent than me. As she led Mary into the main bedroom, she showed her the body of Samuel lying on the bed, very dead. Deceased was still clothed in his shirt and slop, although both were heavily stained with blood from horrible wounds to his face, neck and head. Later it was said that the victim's head had almost been severed from the body, and clearly the weapon had been one which substantial and lethal. Let's go with that. It was lying on the floor beside the bed. Mary couldn't help notice it. Whether it was not... yeah. Mary was basically in shock right now, as you would be. Your friend has just brought you home to their house and told you they killed their husband and showed you the body. Martha then produced a common corn sack and asked Mary to hold it open while she prized her husband's corpse into it. She then dragged the laden sack from the bedroom, through the passage and kitchen, out of the house. Fortunately, Samuel hadn't been a big fat chonker like me. He was quite small and light. Mary followed her, both women crossing the road outside the cottage, walking through Martha's garden to the far side, to the ditch where the sack and the contents were left. Not before Martha had thrown some mud over it. Mary then left with the excuse that she had to make an errand in Larling. It was a good 7 miles away and evening was drawing in. Then on the following day, Monday the 20th, between 9 and 10 o'clock, Mary was again at Martha's cottage. She saw Martha remove the sack in which the body of her husband was held, and once again dragged it to a water-filled pit on the common which lay beside a place called Wright's Plantation. Now I have looked on maps and I can't figure out exactly where these places are. If not, I would tell you. On arrival at the pit, Martha emptied the contents of the sack into it and left, ensuring she took the sack with her. On Tuesday, the 21st, Mary again went to Martha's cottage and assisted in cleaning the parts of the bedroom where the assault took place. So the bed, the sheets, the floor, the walls, everything that was covered in blood from a rather passionate attack, shall we say, with what would later turn out to be, as we said, quite a vicious weapon. Obviously Martha was telling Mary, don't tell anyone about this, don't tell anyone, because now you've done what you've done, you're an accessory to murder, and that also carries a death sentence. Mary, however, obviously being kind of freaked out and a bit confused, as you can quite imagine, the brain would be a bit frazzled. She did tell her dad when she came home that evening, and from then on Martha Alden's world caved in. Word got back to the authorities during the Wednesday morning. Body had been found. Edward Rush came to the scene and was ordered by the constable of Attleborough parish to search Martha Alden's cottage. In the dark corner of one of the rooms he found a billhook on which there appeared to be remnants of blood on the handle and blade, and it looked like it had been washed. That was the murder weapon. If you don't know what a billhook is, maybe Google it. Yeah, you don't want one of those to the face or neck. Let's be honest. Obviously, Martha was then arrested and held at the Norfolk Assizes in Norwich in the Shire Hall. This was in late July 1807. She was put on trial, and Judge Sir Nash Gross basically put it as capitally indicted for the willful murder of her husband, Samuel Alden of Attleborough, Norfolk, when every circumstance of this atrocious act was corroborated. That were his findings, but Judge Gross outlined the case as stating while the man that was asleep in bed with his wife, with a billhook, she inflicted the terrible wounds on his head, face and throat, and with the assistance of a girl named Mary Orvis, the prisoner then, yada yada, moved the body, hid the body, all that kind of stuff, where it was subsequently discovered. First witness, Edmund Draper, was called, confirmed his meeting with the victim in the White Horse and their return home, repeating that he was perfectly sober while the deceased was not. Draper also said he'd stayed at the Alden's cottage for less than 3 minutes, during which time he noticed there was a larger fire than usual for that time of the year, burning in the hearth. He also confirmed that the deceased was in perfectly good health, no ill words had passed between Samuel and Martha while he was there. He also described the cottage as having a kitchen and bedroom on the same ground floor, separated from each other by a small narrow passage. So easy to get from the bedroom to the kitchen to grab the billhook. Another witness, Sarah Leader, a widow of Attleborough, followed to state that on Monday night, the 20th of July, the prisoner came to her house to borrow a spade. The reason given was a neighbour's sow had broken into her garden and rooted up her potatoes. The witness then went on to describe that on the following evening of Tuesday, the 21st, about 11 o'clock, she locked up put her ducks away for the night and found someone missing, so she went for a look for them, as you would. And she found them on the common, in a small pit of water. I think we know where this is going. In the two pits or ponds, in the larger one, she saw something floating which attracted her attention. Went to the edge of the pond and poked it with a stick, as you do, upon which it sank and rose again. Unfortunately, it was a cloudy night, so there wasn't a lot of moonlight. So she just gathered her ducks up and herded them home. Now, the next morning, Wednesday the 22nd, her interest peaked. She went back and touched the substance or the object again with a stick, and then she saw the two hands of a man appear with the arms of his shirt stained with blood. The Norwich Mercury later reported she, the witness, instantly concluded that a murdered man had been thrown in there, and called to a lad to go and acquaint the neighbourhood with the circumstances, and went back in great alarm to her own house. In a quarter of an hour she returned again to the pond, and found that in her absence the body had been taken out. She then knew it to be the body of Samuel Alden, although his face was dreadfully chopped and his head cut very nearly off. The body was put into a cart and carried to the house of the deceased. The witness afterwards went to look for her spade and found it standing by the side of the hole, which she described as looking at a grave dug in the ditch which surrounded the Alden's garden. She further stated that the hole was open, not very deep, and there was blood around it. The third witness, Edward Rush, told the court that on Wednesday the 22nd of July, by order of the constable of the Attleborough parish, he searched the prisoner's residence. In a dark chamber he found the billhook, which had blood on it. He also confirmed the statement of a preceding witness as to the state of the bedroom in the house of the deceased and its dimensions, about 7 foot by 10. Mary Orvis followed as the principal witness. She stated that she'd been acquainted with the prisoner for some time and had frequently been to her house. She described her visits to the prisoner's cottage on and following the 19th and stated that the prisoner slept that night at her father's house. The witness then confirmed that the prisoner bade her to say, "Be sure not to say a word about the matter, for if she did, the witness would certainly be hanged." Upon being questioned to that effect by the judge, this witness also confirmed that she had told the story to her father on a Tuesday night, but to nobody else. The learned judge, Justice Gross, then summed up the evidence in the usual full and able manner expected from judges. However, on the subject of Mary Orvis's testimony, he remarked that it certainly came under great suspicion as being that of an accessory to the attempted concealment of the murder. Viewing it in that light and taking it separately later, he reviewed the situation with extreme caution. Further stated that if it should be found in most material facts to agree with and corroborate the successive statements of the other witnesses whose declarations did not labour under those disadvantages, the jury were then to give it due weight and avail themselves of the information which it threw on the transaction. Very lawyerese. With regard to the principal case, the jury consulted for a very short time before finding Martha Alden guilty. The judge then proceeded to pass upon her sentencing, which was on the next Friday. She would be drawn on a hurdle to the place of execution, there to be hanged by the neck till she was dead, and her body afterwards to be dissected. This was at the time when criminals' bodies were being used as cadavers in hospitals for students to learn on, just to kind of get rid of the older grave robbing thing that was going on at the time. It was at this point that Martha did fully confess for the crimes. She said that he had been comatose, out cold, drunk after his late night visit to the pub, and had threatened to beat her during an earlier argument. She also acknowledged and pleaded that her friend Mary had no concern whatever in the murder, but only assisted at her request in putting the body of her husband into the sack. In other words, all Mary did really was hold the sack open. On Friday 31st of July 1807 at 12 o'clock, Mary Alden, such an unhappy woman, was drawn on a hurdle and executed on Castle Hill in Norwich for the murder of her husband at their cottage near Attleborough, and also from the Norwich Mercury at the time. In the presence of an immense concourse of spectators, she behaved at the fatal tree with the decency becoming of her awful situation. And in the aftermath of the execution, the Alden's cottage was destroyed by neighbours and townspeople to try and get rid of the stain on the town, I guess. And there is the story of Martha Alden. However, that's not quite where it ends, because it is said, and I have not witnessed or experienced this myself, so I can't say yay or nay for sure, but it is said that Martha Alden's ghost to this day still haunts Norwich Castle where she was hung. Apparently her apparition has been seen stalking the halls, billhook in hand. Now, whether that is true or not, as I say, I have no idea. But Norwich Castle has seen a lot of deaths over the centuries, so it wouldn't surprise me if there's a fair few spirits present there, let's say. Anyway, thank you very much for watching on a long-winded ramble. If you've made it this far, congratulations and thanks. Don't forget to do the like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share the video out to your friends, family, colleagues, anyone you think might be interested in a spot of local Attleborough history. But thank you very much for watching. Enjoy your hobbies, whatever they are. Peace out. Rock on. Bye bye. Bye.